Hey everybody, welcome to the Sales Questions Podcast. Today I got a common question about the 10,000 hour rule. I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell and his book Outliers. I tend to agree with him on a lot of things, but I think it all needs clarification and context, because what ends up happening is people misinterpret it. It's not just working for 10,000 hours. That'd be approximately 5 years, 2,000 hours in a year. And that's usually what managers are looking for a seasoned salesperson is 5 years of experience. Now, what happens, of course, is that those 2,000 hours may be the same 40 hours, 50 times a year times 5, instead of what they call deliberate practice. Now, the examples he uses have context around them. One, that the people are super into what they do, meaning that he uses the Beatles. And in the case of the Beatles or any team sport, what you have is a lot of feedback. Now, a musician gets a tremendous amount of feedback, not only from the audience, but from the other players in the band. Now, that's what's called deliberate practice, meaning where you do something, you get feedback, you do it better. You do something, you get feedback, you do it better. The problem in sales is we do it, we don't really get so much feedback immediately because our clients don't tell us the truth. Our managers sometimes don't tell us the truth. Our coworkers don't care because they got their own problems. And there's no clean way of doing practice. Now, this is probably why Gong's so successful in giving feedback on sales calls. And this is why I come up with the courses and then I include mentorship in it or coaching or feedback or Q&A so that it's not just you watching how to do it. And then what happens? People typically don't do it or they assume that they know how to do it. But everything looks real easy until you do it. I mean, if you ever looked at a musical instrument and go, I could do that. And then you try it and you're like, oh boy. This is a lot harder than I thought. Sales is kind of like that. Now, what do most people do? The first day they go out and they buy 5 books and they listen to them, read them, listen to a bunch of podcasts. And it's good. It's information. It's typically valuable information, somewhat applicable to what you're doing. And they get overwhelmed and they try and do it all at once and they get stuck. So how do you cut that 10,000 hours down to like 1,000 hours, like 6 months of dedicated practice? And how do you get practice where you can actually do something, get feedback, correct it, do it again, get feedback, correct it, get better, anticipate, and then get to the point of prevention? Because sales is a prevention profession. It's not a reactive recovery profession. Everyone treats it as handling objections. You don't handle objections, you prevent objections. Closing a deal. You guide a deal, especially a complex deal, through the stages so that it closes naturally. So everything becomes natural, like every other human relationship in our life. We try and treat it with trickery, manipulation, or force, or pressure. And what happens there is, especially today, people have defenses. People are smart enough to wiggle out, and you might get somebody to do it sometimes in some cases. I'm not saying, and you're dealing with people here, right? And that's what's crazy about sales, is that whatever you're selling is a little different than what I'm selling, which is a little different than the guy even the next desk to you. He's got a different territory. He's got a different customer base. He's talking to somebody else. Each deal's a little bit different. So how do you break this down? By breaking it down. This is what I teach in the course. I break it down into both the science. So I teach the science, I give examples of the art, and then I take your execution of the art and the science, and I give you feedback. Now that's the point that's deliberate practice. Now, how else? Just asking. How else in sales do you deliberately practice? Some people write stuff down. I posted this on LinkedIn. Some people do role play. I think a lot more people say they do role play than do it. Sometimes managers have to torture people to do it. I sold forever, and I think I role played maybe 45 minutes in the lifetime I did it, because it's uncomfortable, it's weird, it's awkward. If you can do it, I have nothing against it. I'm just saying what will really work. Talking to somebody really works, right? Imagine having somebody that, you pay, you incentivize to have your success on the line, who you want, or they want you to be a raving fan to tell other people. Somebody who has a vested interest in your success. That's what you want. Otherwise, what you'll get is this. I'll tell you. What does every podcast say? Hustle and grind. Hustle. It's just, all you have to do is work 10,000 hours. Well, that's 5 years of deliberate practice, and you're not going to get that in 5 years. That's probably 10 years, honestly. And I've seen salespeople and even sales trainers with 20, 30 years experience still not understanding how the complex sale works. Why? Because they stuck with what they were comfortable with. They got to the B plus level, and they were better than the guy next to them, so they thought they could go out and train. Now, I, like you, I have to practice. I have to map out what I'm doing. I talk it through with my friends. I have a network of people that I've worked with that have specialties in marketing and in sales and executive coaching. And, I also videotape and audio record myself several times a week that I try and listen to. And I understand the pain you feel. And if you go back to the early podcast, you'll see some difference. I remember when I first started, I started on YouTube. I did start the podcast 9 years ago, but nobody listened to podcasts 9 years ago. So it wasn't as fruitful. YouTube was becoming popular. So I started on YouTube, and I got some traction there. But the scary part was I saw myself on video. And you're like, wow, I could use a lot of work. And all of a sudden, it really helped. And what you saw was I gradually, put more smiles on, tried to make things a little bit more funny, tried to build a story and an example into it so that people could connect with it and relate to it and have an example in their mind. And it took probably 3 to 6 months before the videos became engaging enough to do it. And this is back before selfie sticks were even out. So I had to kind of like hold the phone while I walked. And plus, it was kind of avant-garde in that I didn't want them to be polished. I wanted me to walk around and think up, what pearls of wisdom that I could share with you about sales and what people are getting wrong about sales. And it was right at the time of the Challenger sale came out, and all my clients were showing me the book, and I was trying to explain that was just a skill. Debating, bringing an insight is important and can be used when you have an even-keeled person. If you have the beauty contests type of sale where they're already bought into the concept, but you need to differentiate yourself, you're better off with a lockout or setting the rules or setting traps for your competitor. I'm getting off point. Okay, so let's face it. So 10,000 hours in sales is probably 10 to 15 years because let's face it, most of what we do is routine. There's travel, there's phone calls, there's emails. And a lot of it's automated now, and very little of it works. So what do you need? You need somebody to kind of help you through. And is it your manager? Well, you got to ask yourself, has your manager sold the product that you sell recently? I mean, like this year, within the last year. What are their beliefs? And what you find is you get people all over the map about what works and what doesn't work. But what hasn't changed about sales is we're selling to people. And people have not changed that much in a long time. We adapt to these technologies, and what we do is we embrace the technologies that keep people like salespeople away from them until they want to talk to them. But our job is to talk to them before they want to talk to us, right? That's our role. And everybody just loves the pitch. And I got some hate over the last couple of weeks about that from the simple sale. Now, and every sale is different. If you have a big brand name where you say the brand and everybody knows what you do and they know they've already bought some of your product, maybe the pitch is okay. Maybe the introduction. And actually, I kind of got into it with somebody on LinkedIn. And then a week later, he came back, and you can actually see this on LinkedIn. He said, you know what? I started these conversations and it's working a lot better. Now, he didn't take my course. He just, was frustrated. Well, how will they know what I do? How will they know who I am? And it's like he just had it backwards. And it wasn't his fault. He was taught that. And that's what everybody's taught. And the problem is, if everybody does it, it no longer works. Remember, blogs used to be fantastic until everybody blogs. And, the last 3 years, podcasting has been fantastic. And podcasting is, went way up about a year and a half ago. Now it's kind of gone down because there's too many of them. And the ones that have stuck through are resonating, or the people who really bring value instead of just having, so-called experts on 5 days a week and bombarding you with contradictory messages instead of a consistent theme about what really does work. Okay, so let's talk about it. Does it take 10,000 hours? Depends how complex your sale is. How many meetings? How much does it cost? How competitive it is? How well it's already understood? Do you have a brand behind you, or are you at a startup? Do people recognize the problem yet? Or is it latent pain? All of these things will play into the skills that you need. Now, the easy answer is you tell me. Are you blowing your number away? If you're not like crushing your quota, at least 120%. Okay, because if you're like under 80%, you're going to be put on a plan and fired, basically. I mean, that's what happens in sales. You get fired. Why? Because it's always our fault. It doesn't matter if the territory's barren or the product doesn't work or support sucks or your managers keep you in meetings all the time. Believe me, I lived through it all, right? It's always your fault. And the problem is you can't argue with that because it's always your fault. So what do you have to do? You have to find a way that works with or without the support of your organization. And most of the time, I didn't have the support of my organization. Several times I did things that were contradictory. I was always selling very complex new products at startups against big companies. And one of my key strategies was to stay in front of the customers because I didn't have many deals a quarter. If I had 5 reasonable good deals a quarter, I was doing great. So I knew, okay, you had 12 weeks, and I had a little bit of access to some pre-sales people, and I'd be like, let's just go on site. Let's get them using the product. Let's spend some time with them. Let's find out the process. I didn't do the classic presentation, demo, proposal, hound to death because it didn't work, because this was something new. There wasn't a compelling event. They had to do all the championing and inside selling within their own company, and it would tend to die. And what would happen is 80% of the salespeople would either get fired or leave. And that's kind of the nature of these early stage startups. And there would be a handful of people that would figure it out. And I used to have this statement because, one manager I worked for took Atlanta away from me, and I had done really good in Atlanta. And he hired and fired 3 people in a year and a half. And I kind of said one day to somebody else, I go, when's he going to figure out that it's not the people? And he never figured out it wasn't the people. It was him and his expectations and just that he was hiring people who had experience in big companies with brand names, but not the skill of a startup where you don't have the brand name and you don't have the infrastructure, the install base, repeat business, leads, all those things that you'd like to have as a salesperson. And if you have those, you're probably not listening to a podcast. You're probably just taking orders. And if you're ever in that situation, enjoy it, because it doesn't last. Because your manager will figure out he can put 2 or 3 people in the territory for the same cost as you. So enjoy it and milk it for as much as you can get. But most of us are hired because there's not enough business, not to manage the orders that are coming in. So 10,000 hours. How do you break that down? You break down the job into the littlest pieces possible. And this is what I teach. And you become good at those things. You don't do it all at once. And you have to come up with a deliberate practice mechanism, a way of getting feedback, not just from your customers. You got to get it from your customers, but you like to get it from a colleague, a coach, a podcaster who has a course online, somebody, right? And be able to be vulnerable, because you got to be like the Beatles. Basically, for 4 years, they played at these little dive clubs 8 hours a day. So not only did they hear the feedback from the audience throwing stuff at them, they had to look at each other when someone screwed up, and they couldn't let someone else down. That's why, like team sports, people really pick them up faster as opposed to an individual sport. Also, it depends on how much you're into it. And the key to enjoying something is that flow state. And the flow state is a little bit out of your comfort zone, just a tiny bit. And then constantly, but not so far out your comfort zone that you freak out. And so you want it just a little bit outside, but not freaking out. So the key there is to build that habit. And that's what the deliberate practice is to have somebody say, well, how about if you did this? And like in the course, I rewrite people's emails. I review their map to money. I show them where the deals are going to get stuck and why. I help them come up with a strategy to prevent it. Focus on prevention versus repair. Repair is so hard that you're just going to be disappointed, because you're talking about maybe 1 out of 5 times it'll work. Prevention works 9 times out of 10. So that's where you want to be. But how do you do it? You have to know what to prevent. If you don't know what to prevent, how can you prevent it? You have to know somebody who's taken the journey before. And that's why I use the term Deal Sherpa. Deal Sherpa is somebody who's climbed the mountain, hundreds of times. They know what the mountain looks like. They know every river, every loose rock. They guide people through it. And that's why you pay them. It's not to carry your crap. It's to guide you through that process. So you can either spend 5, 10, 15 years doing this in frustration and aggravation. And believe me, this is what happens to most salespeople. I've seen it too many times. They come in and they typically have success that is somewhat due to them, but mostly due to a bluebird or a good territory, and they think it's them. And then they have a little bit more success because of them. So they feel very comfortable. This is why you see a lot of 25-year-olds in this space of either social media or I love the life coaches. Okay, you're 25 and you're a life coach. What life experience? Oh, I went to college. Well, so did everybody else. And what are you doing now? Well, I build websites and life coach. Maybe you want a little bit more life. Right? You don't have a Sherpa that hasn't climbed the mountain, right? Because then you're both climbing the mountain for the first time. And nothing against, I love millennials. I think that the millennial thing is a bunch of bullshit. I think, I grew up when there were hippies. And everybody was talking about the hippies. And then there was the Gen X and the slackers and the rebels and the grunge. And I'm like, it's called being in your 20s. In your 20s, you're kind of rebellious. You're kind of getting out of college. You're figuring out your way in the world. You really don't know what to do. You haven't hit that comfort zone yet. Everything's awkward. And plus, you got pressure from everybody, and then you see one of your friends be super successful, and you go, why isn't that me? First, B2B sales is the place to be. So if you're in B2B sales, you're in the right place. You may not be in the right industry, the right company, or the right position, but you're in a great place to make a lot of money. But you can't get too comfortable. When I see these sales development reps go out and start their own company, I'm like, oh, come on. What do you know? Most of the sales trainers are like that. They got 5 years experience. They've got, which is like 500 to 1,000 hours. They knew how to sell one product to one type of customer. They could rock the phone or rock social or rock email, but things have changed. Now you need to know how to do all of those things in different ways and understand people. And how do you do it without leads? Because you know what? Marketing ain't producing the leads they ought to. Hey, this is a little bit long for a Sales Questions podcast. I hope it's been helpful. So deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is doing something small, tiny, being able to get some feedback. Now, think about something that you're really good at already. Most likely it's a team sport, or maybe it's something you've been doing for a long time. Cooking, driving, playing a game, video games, chess, whatever it is. And ask yourself, how'd you get good at it fast? Not how'd you get good at it slow, meaning trial and error, work. That's what, you can do that, but that's 5 to 10 years. We're talking about 6 months to a year. The way to learn how to do it fast is you took a class. You went to a cooking class. And then you got the expression when someone ate it, right? Or you ate it. And then you tried it again, and you tried it again, and you modified it, and you bought some cookbooks. You watched the cooking channel. And all of a sudden, it got better and better and better. And you kept with simple dishes, and then you expanded out with ingredients, utensils, and things. How do you learn a video game? Okay, you could just plug it in and, wing it. Or you could get on YouTube and watch somebody who's done it before, listen to what they do. That's why those YouTube channels are so popular, because people are sick of making all these mistakes. It's like what I did just the other day. I bought this battery case for my iPhone so that when I hate traveling, but when I do, I like my phone to last all day without being tethered to a plug. And I looked at it and it didn't work. I plugged it all in and I connected it and it wasn't charging my phone. So I go on YouTube and I search for it, and 5 minutes in, they show me, at the bottom, there's this button that you can't see because it's black on black, and it just is like a 1/16 of an inch off, so it looks more like a tab than a button. So I plugged the phone in and I hit the button. Now, I thought the thing didn't work. That was my problem. And that's why I needed, deliberate learning there, or I would have just wasted the money in buying the product or trying to figure out how to return a product that works perfectly fine. Now, this is what I'm talking about. And we have to go through this process. I know it's painful, but yet, first, you got to build up the passion for sales. Why are you doing it? Get a picture of why you're in sales so that when you go through these little bit of pain, the little bit of discomfort, the little bit outside your comfort zone to become better, that you know why you're doing it. That it's not because you love punishment or you want to feel like you don't know something. Trust me, none of us are perfect at sales. None of us are flying around in G5 jets, except for the phony baloney ones on YouTube that rent them and paint their logo on the side to impress you. What we have to do is just constantly get out of our comforts. I got to push myself, several times a week to do it, to contact people I'd rather not contact. To explain what I do and how I do it. And, I got to do it. And I've been doing this forever. And I get out of it. It's still uncomfortable sometimes. And then I got to look at my map to money. I go, what's the easiest way to do this? How do I get people coming to me? And that's a lot of work. But we all have to do it. And you can take the long road and do it by trial and error, because unfortunately, sales isn't a team sport like basketball or being in a band where you get immediate feedback. In some cases, it may be. Maybe you have people both on your management side. And the problem is it constructive feedback? Are they telling you the right thing to do? And unfortunately, what I'm hearing more and more is they're telling you to do KPIs, which aren't effective. And I understand that. But if you have like pre-sales people or more senior salespeople where you can get feedback from them. And what held me accountable a lot through my career was that we were tethered to pre-sales people, and I never wanted to let them down. I wanted them to get their bonus. And I also, when I had a great manager, I wanted my manager to be impressed with what I did. I wanted him or her to respect me. And I wanted to be able to make commitments to closing deals and closing them. And I felt strongly about that. And, did I get feedback? Sometimes. I asked for it, and I'm going to do this session on the B2B show where I have this guy who's really good at it. And we're going to go through the process with him. It's targeted at managers, but he really talks about people. And the problem is, that, and we talked about it, is that by the time the manager gives you feedback, it's not good feedback. Instead of it being like, what are you doing here? Okay, and what's the reaction you get? And what do you think we should do next? And let's get a round table and let's see who, the best practices. And there's typically some maverick there that's doing something a little bit different and having great success because they're not doing what they're told. They're doing what they've figured out works. And that's kind of the role we're in. We kind of got to figure it out on our own because what we're taught doesn't work anymore. And believe me, I see it on LinkedIn and YouTube all the time. It's the same stuff I've been hearing for 30 years. And does it work? And it works if, and the example they give is like the Gordon Gekko example from Wall Street from 1998, where the guy called Gordon Gekko every day for a year. And I'm like, can that work? I guess. But how many people can you do that to? And how much fun is that? It's fun the 365th day when you happen to catch him on his birthday like they did in the movie. But today, I have people calling me 15 times a day. And they're not going to get through. They are under no circumstance am I going to answer that phone. Because the first time I looked at the voicemail and it was some gibberish and I couldn't even understand it. I have no interest. I have no idea who it is, what they want. And I'm sure they want to sell me something I don't want or need. So they don't get through. Instead of doing the things that I teach, I'm a human being. Connect with me. Help me. Right? And believe me, we all know how to help each other if we really open up our minds. Sorry I went on too long. But this is how we have to do this. Otherwise, think how much it's going to cost you. 5 or 10 years of even like 10%, making 10% less. Let's say you're making $200,000, and you should be making $250,000. So that's $500,000, $250,000. Might be worth it. Okay, think about it.